You're listening to episode number 74 of the Transform Your Life from the Inside Out podcast. This is a Monday Q&A episode, and the question that I'm going to answer this week is, why can't I stop procrastinating even though it causes me mental stress? So the question is, are you a procrastinator? And if you are, you're probably going to love this episode. Keep listening. Hi, I'm Jim Fortin, and you're about to start transforming your life from the inside out with this podcast. I'm widely considered the leader in subconscious transformation, and I've coached superachievers all around the world for over 25 years. Here, you're going to find no rah-rah motivation and no hype, because this podcast is a combination of brain science, transformational psychology, and ancient wisdom all rolled into one to take your life to levels you've never thought possible. If you're wanting a lot more in life, to feel better, to heal, to have peace of mind, to feel powerful and alive, and to bring more abundance and prosperity into your life, then this podcast is for you, because you're going to start learning how to master your mind and evolve your consciousness. And when you do that, anything you want then becomes possible for you. I'm glad you're here. Procrastination. Now, the question that I have is, how does it actually show up in your life? And probably a lot of people listening to this episode, and by the way, it's not going to be that long. It's going to be hopefully under 20 minutes. And I want to give you a couple of brain hacks to start eliminating procrastination in your life. But how does it affect you? Over the years, I've done a lot of research on what procrastination is. And I found a lot of different research, and it says different things. What I've observed, and I'll explain this in a little bit, that I've seen that procrastination more than anything is fear-based, which we'll get to in just a minute. But in reading all the articles that I've read over the years, scholarly articles, research, etc., there are several things that people say procrastination is. Some people say, some scientists and psychologists say it's fear-based. Some, and I even heard somebody say, well, we have conclusive evidence to prove that it is stress-based, which I'll talk about in just a bit. And that's interesting that the person who wrote this in said she procrastinates, but it causes her even more mental stress. And there is some research that shows that procrastination is stress-induced. Some people say that it's a lack of self-regulation, meaning managing your behavior. Some people say that it's brain-based because what happens is we get into procrastination as a result of time perception and a lack of self-awareness. Now, what I look at all of this, and I'm like, okay, every bit of this makes sense to me, and I can see this in my clients and people in my coaching programs. But I'm not so concerned about what the cause of stress is, because I have a simple way around it for you, and something when you start practicing, it'll make it very easy for you to actually get yourself into action to, I don't know if I want to use the word push through, but to get yourself to do things that in the past you've been procrastinating on doing. Now, let's go here first. This is what I've noticed over the years. I said a bit earlier when I started that procrastination is actually induced by fear. And what I've noticed over the years, and it just dawned on me one day, but I've noticed that many times people get into procrastination to avoid fear, but they will get into an avoidance behavior that will look like procrastination. So let me give you an example of that. Many, many years ago, when I coached highly in the real estate industry, I was talking to this agent, and she told me earlier in our conversation that she really had a fear of prospecting, which, by the way, the real estate industry is an eat what you kill industry. You kill nothing, you eat nothing. And she was saying things like, and she couldn't even see this in herself. She said, I'm not making the kind of money that I want to make. I'm not making a lot of money. And I said, well, tell me about, your typical day and your typical week. And she goes, oh, I stay really busy. And I said, tell me what you stay busy doing. And it was all busy work. It was all things that these things weren't going to make her money, but they were all things that were an avoidance behavior, which means that she avoided prospecting, because if she prospected, she could possibly be told no, and in her mind that was rejection. So therefore, she got into procrastination when it came to prospecting, because she didn't want to be told no. And I saw a lot of that. And I've seen so many people over the years that they get into avoidance behavior so that they don't have to actually be rejected by people or they're not judged. I know you've heard me say before that our two biggest fears are the fear of abandonment and the fear of inadequacy. And if we don't put ourselves out there and we procrastinate putting ourselves out there, we therefore, by default, we actually avoid being judged, being rejected, or being told that we're not good enough. The interesting cycle here is that, let's say, for example, that the examples I just gave you resonate with you. Well, putting yourself out there is fearful for a lot of people. So what happens is fear makes us feel bad. And the way for us to, the irony here, the way for us to avoid feeling bad is to actually avoid the behavior altogether, meaning avoiding even thinking about putting ourselves out there. Therefore, let me go procrastinate. And while I'm procrastinating, let me get into self-deception and fool myself into thinking that I'm actually doing something that's going to generate an outcome for me. And here's something else. This is brain-based. Once we go into procrastination, in that moment, there's an alleviation. Let's say, for example, that I don't want to prospect, and I know that I have to prospect, and so I'm actually procrastinating, so I don't have to prospect, so people don't tell me no. But guess what? If I go into an avoidance behavior, and let's say I go do some busy work, like working on a flyer or just something that's busy work, like a deep breath. What happens there is that's instant gratification. That's relief for us because we feel better because we're no longer confronting, being told no, rejection, inadequacy, whatever it might be. And then that's instant gratification for us. And the unfortunate thing about the way the brain works is the more that we do something, the more habitual it becomes. And the more habitual it comes, the more that it happens automatically. Therefore, if we get into procrastination as an avoidance behavior, the more that we actually get into procrastination as an avoidance behavior, the better it feels because, like I said, we're not going to put ourselves out there. And then what happens is we get rewarded. We feel good for, avoiding the behavior, but then we actually get into procrastination and it becomes a cycle for us. Now, I said a whole lot there, but hopefully that makes a lot of sense to you. Now, when I say people get into procrastination, they get into what I call delayism. And that delayism is either positive or negative. And negative delayism, this is why people will say things like, you know what, I was going to do something today to work on my business. Now, go back to the entire scenario that I gave you is they don't want to do it because they're going to be judged if they put out a video or an Instagram post or do a Facebook Live or show up at work or do a listing presentation or a client meeting or whatever. So what they do is they go into delayism, both positive and negative. Negative would be is, you know what? This person might say, they would say, you know what? I meant to put out that listing presentation or I meant to go to a meeting or I meant to shoot a video or whatever, but I just spent 2 hours on YouTube and I don't even know why. I mean, I didn't want to do it. I knew I should be doing other things, or I've been posting on Instagram or I've been, I've been watching kitten videos or whatever it is, but that's negative delayism. It's something to distract you. Now, on the flip side, it's also delayism, but people can get into positive delayism. And that could be, for example, like, you know what, I don't want to actually do XYZ because of all the reasons I just talked about earlier, why people get into it. So I'm going to clean out my office closet, or I'm going to clean the house today, or I'm going to organize my desk, or organize my office, or whatever. And I know you get the point, but that's also positive delayism. Either way, negative or positive, they're both delayism, and they actually prevent you, because they're a form of procrastination, they prevent you from actually executing on things that you need to do to create the outcomes that you want. Now, the cycle gets even worse for some people, and this may be, the person who wrote in as well, is when she said, why can't I stop procrastinating, which we're talking about that right now, even though it causes me mental stress. What she didn't clarify is I don't know what mental stress means to her. But for many people, what they go into next, and that may pertain to the person who wrote in, is they go into guilt and they go into shame. And it sets in because, for example, a cycle would be this. I need to do X, Y, Z, which is, whatever the target behavior is. But then what they do is it happens brain-based and it's unconsciously. Then they get into the fear of inadequacy or the fear of people are going to judge me or whatever. Then what they do is they get into delayism, which is either positive or negative. Now what happens is their target behavior never happened because they're into procrastination. Then what happens, the next part of the cycle is the game, and not the game, but the guilt and the shame sets in because guess what? You didn't do what you needed to do to hit your goals. And look what we have here. We have another vicious cycle. Also, when I started, I said that procrastination was a form of stress relief. And research has shown that your level of stress affects what you do. And when you're distracted by things that stress you, you're likely it's funny that our brains are just crazy the way they mess with us, but you're likely to put off things that cause you more stress or things that have been stressful to you, and you put it off, which actually is even more stress because then you get into what's called the procrastination accumulation effect. And basically, that's when you put things off and then you actually feel stressed because of that, or you put things off because they're stressing you out. Let me rephrase that. You put things off because they stress you out, and then you get stressed about putting things off that stress you out. And again, that's the procrastination accumulation effect. And the person who wrote in, that may be what she's getting into. So essentially is that you leave things undone and you feel overwhelmed. And again, that's another vicious cycle. Okay, so how do we fix all this? How do we actually, and I don't know the right word for this, but how do we start taking more action and how do we actually get into action and out of procrastination? There we go. So you hear me say in so many episodes, there's a common thread that runs through a lot of episodes, and that is about calming your mind and calming your body. I don't know the exact episode. I think it's number 6, where I talk about living from your highest potential. And in that episode, I talk about how many people think that your highest potential is all about creating something in the external world. The highest potential that I'm talking about is living from your innate, inborn potential as a cosmic being. Where are you and what state are you in when you're living at your highest potential? And that state is that you're living with silence of mind, because that is power. That's why I definitely recommend things which, you've heard me talk about a lot: meditation, self-hypnosis, mindfulness, and awareness. So what you may want to do is get online and just, Google a mindfulness training or awareness training or self-hypnosis for, silent mind or something like that. Okay, that's one thing that you can do. Secondly, I think it was, who was the guy who wrote 7 Habits of Highly Effective People? Okay, yeah, Stephen Covey. And I believe in the book, it's been a lot of years, but they had in there process management, and they had in there what's called the Eisenhower Matrix. And what they said in the book, I think it was the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, is that Eisenhower was so effective because he had 4 categories that he put things into, and basically he just managed his behavior. So that's something else that you can do is actually just Google that, Eisenhower Matrix, and look at the 4 categories that Eisenhower used to manage his behavior. That's another way to get out of procrastination. Another way, and guys, I'm hitting the highlights right here because I want to give you a brain hack in a moment. Another way is emotional management. Because do you notice when you get into procrastination, you're in your emotions. You're into fear or overwhelm or stress or whatever it is. And notice these are all emotions. And I'm going to share with you that our level of emotional intelligence in the world is very low because guess what? All over the world, we go to school in first grade and we're taught mechanical things, we're taught linear things, we're taught math and science and reading. And, first grade, I think now, I don't know what they learn, but back, when I was in first grade, we learned reading. Now they probably learn when they're 4 years old or 3 years old. But notice school is all about left brain analytical things about the world. But what we're never taught in school, at least in the public school system that I was in and in the US, is we're not taught emotional management. And what's vital is that we learn to manage our emotions. Also, I want to point out here is many times people, and I'm not going to go into this deeply, it's a whole different episode, is that people actually want to manage their emotions because they want to manage how they feel. Here's the thing, you may want to write this down and learn this, is that you feel like you think, which therefore means we also need to learn to manage our thinking. So consider that for a moment. If you actually feel good, you are having feel good thoughts. If you are actually emotionally feeling bad, you are having feeling bad thoughts. We must learn to manage our emotions. And in a whole different vein, what I've been taught over the years in shamanism is that we have emotions because we're biological creatures as well, and we're human beings, or we're incarnated, and we're beings, cosmic beings that have incarnated into a human body. We have emotions, but here's the thing, and notice your own life, and actually just look back for the past half a day. Most people live their life entangled in their emotions. And what I've been taught is this exact phrase: a lifetime spent in your emotions is a wasted lifetime. So I've been taught to, obviously, because we have emotions and they happen just, brain based, is have the emotion, experience the emotion, acknowledge the emotion, and move through the emotion. But so many people get trapped in their emotions, and I've seen people get trapped, the masses, for a lifetime in their anger and their hate and their shame and their guilt and all these things. So I'll leave it at this, but definitely we want to look into, and this reminds me, I probably need to do an episode on emotional management. Okay, a couple more things here, and then I'll tell you how I approach. Because I'm just like you. I mean, I grew up on the planet, obviously, and I learned how to be a procrastinator, and I want to tell you how I get through it. Okay, one more thing here is also procrastination can be completely habitual. I don't know what episode it is, number 5 or so. You'll see the title, but go back and listen to the earlier episodes, at least 1 through 10. But number 5, I talk about the prefrontal cortex, which is the thinking part of the brain, and I talk about the reptilian part of the brain, which actually is a part of the brain where our habits are housed. So we can prefrontal cortex think all day long, oh, I need to get that report out. But what happens is the reptilian part of the brain, some people call it the monkey brain, that part of the brain might be habituated to actually get into fear or procrastination itself or whatever, and it sabotages the prefrontal cortex, thinking part of the brain. What I want to share also, and you'll hear in episode, I think, number 5 on habits, is that your reptilian part of the brain, the oldest part of the brain, will always win over your thinking part of the brain. Always. Well, yeah, almost always. Let me give you an example here to demonstrate it though. Let's say that you're watching the weather. You check the app on your phone and it's like tomorrow's going to be cold and rainy and it's going to be nasty outside, stay inside all day long. And it's a Saturday, you're at home or going to go to the home office or go to the office or whatever. And you start thinking, okay, if it's going to be really nasty tomorrow, then you know what? I'm going to organize my office. I mean, it's a mess and I've been wanting to do it for a long time. Yep, that's what I'm going to do tomorrow. So the next morning you wake up, you open the curtains, and guess what? The weatherman was wrong, and it's beautiful outside. Then what you do is you start thinking, because what happens is the office, wanting to do the office, is left brain analytical, but we're driven by the reptilian part of the brain, which is habitual. And then you start thinking, which actually activates the limbic system, which is the middle brain. You know what? It sure would be nice to go to the park today. And then you get into the emotions about that, which come from the limbic system. And notice that the analytical thinking is, I've got to clean the office, but the emotions kick in from the limbic system, the middle brain, and you're like, I'm going to go to the park today. And guess what? The office never gets cleaned. And I've been there before, and that's how I came up with the hack that I want to share with you. So obviously we're brain driven, but let me give you the hack that I came up with. Literally, I came up with this myself a lot of years ago. And I came up with this when I had to make a phone call that I didn't want to make. So let me walk you through the process. It's really, really simple. Is if you think about, and every one of you listening, think about a phone call in the past that you didn't want to make. And we've all had them. So you didn't want to make the phone call. So what you did is you procrastinated and put it off and procrastinated forever, like hours or days or maybe even weeks. You put off a phone call. Now, I want you to think about that very same phone call, and I want you to look at how you felt emotionally before you made the phone call, and look at all the fear, which I talked about earlier, and all the stress that it was associated with that phone call. Now, think ahead. The phone call's already been made. Think about how much better you feel after the phone call has already been made. The stress relief has already been taken care of because you actually obviously went through the process I just told you about earlier. So you had a lot of stress about making it, but then you made it and then you alleviated the stress. Hopefully this is making sense. But here's the thing. It dawned on me many years ago because I'm a master hypnotist and I've always known that part of the brain does not know the difference, and research demonstrates this, between real and imagined. And it dawned on me, I'm like, I haven't even made that phone call yet, and it's been a source of stress to me. Now, what if I imagined that I already made that phone call? If I already imagined that I'd already made it, how would I feel? Which obviously I would like have no stress. How would I feel? And as a result of that, guess what? It's now easy because I'm not stressed to actually, and I'm going to give you a little twist here. If I'm not feeling stress, what I can do is I can pick up the phone and make the phone call. Now, here's the caveat and the twist. What I had to do to keep myself in that calm, and I wasn't like freaking out or anything, but to keep myself in that state, that easy state to make the call, here's what I had to do. And I learned this inadvertently as well. We did this a lot, as a hypnotist. But I remember one time I was at my chiropractor's, and he was going to actually adjust my neck. And he said, "Hey, Jim," he goes, "I want you to focus on your toes, and I want you to wiggle your toes." And the second I did that, he adjusted my neck. And I thought, wow, that was a great diversion technique, because what he did, you've probably heard me say this a lot, he moved my attention. And my attention was not on the adjustment, it was on my toes. And when the attention was on my toes, guess what? I was not paying attention to my neck. Now, you might already be seeing between the lines here. So, once I imagine the call has already been made, I move my attention to anything but the call, even as I'm dialing. Why? Because my attention is somewhere else. To give you another example on that might help you out, working with a shaman as many years as I have, I'm on a very significant regimen of things. And there's meaning holistic things that I take, and herbs and tinctures that I make and stuff like that. And my brother-in-law has me on something that is not pleasant tasting, and I drink it every day. And I remember one day that I'm like, okay, here I go again, which was I would like procrastinate drinking it because it tasted so bad. And I remember one day I sat there with the cup near my lips, and I looked out my kitchen window, and there was a blue jay. And I was looking at the bird, and as I was looking at this beautiful bird, I started drinking this tonic that I was taking. And I noticed that I drank the tonic all the way down, not a problem, very quickly. Why? Because my attention was moved somewhere else. So I share this with you because the easiest way to get out of procrastination, notice when you're actually procrastinating, that's where all of your attention is. Fear, stress, worry, procrastination. Fear, stress, worry, procrastination. But if I actually move my attention to something else and then start engaging in the behavior now, and then moving my attention, I'm already in the behavior. And research also demonstrates, like, I'll give you another example here. Let's say that you're procrastinating on cleaning the kitchen. This podcast, actually, I'm shooting it. I'm not shooting, geez, habits. I'm recording it the day after Thanksgiving. And a lot of you basically here in the U.S. are like, man, that kitchen is a mess, and I don't want to go clean it yet. But notice what happens once you start cleaning and you wash that first bowl. What most of us don't do is say, well, I'm going to stop right there. We clean the whole kitchen. It's easier to keep doing something once we've started it. So what I share with you, and hopefully this all makes sense, is that let's go back to the example of calling somebody. You procrastinate and you don't want to do it, therefore you don't start by dialing the phone. So what we do is we move our attention as if we've already made the phone call, which then releases the procrastination stress. Then what we do is we keep our attention moved to anything but the phone call, even as we're picking up the phone and we're dialing the phone. Because guess what? Once that person says hello, and if they answer, you're on the phone, now you're in the process of it. So this process that I just gave you, and hopefully it makes sense. This process is the process that I use, and being 100% transparent, I don't really know that I'm an air quote bad procrastinator, but I'm going to share with you, I can definitely procrastinate. I mean, there are just days that I don't want to do things. And the way that I get through it, I'm going to keep it simpler. I'm going to tell you how I get through it. What I just gave you is kind of a process that I figured out over the years. The way that I get through it is I say 2 words to myself, because I can procrastinate going to the gym. I can procrastinate, ordering dinner or making dinner or whatever. I can procrastinate on a lot of things. And for me to stop my procrastination, it's very easy. Here, this is really simple. This is what I say, is I say to myself, stop talking, and I immediately execute. And what I do when I stop talking, what I really mean is move, because it's meaning for me, move your attention, execute. And the thing about that, as I learned many, many years ago as well, when I was 18, is that when we condition ourselves, we actually respond to the world based upon the conditioning, which you've heard me talk about a lot. So when I go into and I say stop talking, and then I execute, meaning some form of physical behavior, I'm already engaging myself in a behavior that I was initially procrastinating against. Whew, hopefully that made sense to you guys, but this is an easy way to stay out of procrastination, stay out of the emotions, simply move your attention. That being said, you might have heard me say before, and if you have not, go over to my website, jimfortin.com. The link will be in the show notes, and download the Master Thought Formula, where I show you quite literally how to transform your thinking very, very quickly. I think it's like a 90-minute video series. There's no charge. And candidly, it's one of the best pieces of content that I've ever put out, the best pieces of transformational content, let me say, that I've ever put out to help people to transform their lives. Okay, that wraps up this episode, and the next episode coming up on Wednesday is, you guys have all heard, you see all the memes on Facebook and Instagram, you got to change your mindset, change your mindset. All these people screaming about changing your mindset. Well, I'm going to prove it to you next week, and I've talked about it here in the podcast. Changing your mindset never works. Why? Because mindset is analytical prefrontal cortex left brain, and everything you want to change is actually either limbic system or reptilian brain or subconscious identity. So if you've tried to change your mindset before and you have failed, and that applies to everyone listening, then make sure you tune in to the Wednesday episode. Okay, thanks for listening. Take care and make it a great day today. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to this entire podcast. If you're the kind of person who likes to help others, then share this with your friends and family. If you found value, they will too. So please share via your social media channels. Also, if you have questions, I'm here to assist. You can email me questions to support@jimfortin.com, and I may even use your question for a future podcast episode. Also, if you want transformational content like this daily, connect with me on Instagram. My Instagram name is I am Jim Fortin. Finally, I do have a personal request. I believe that we're all here to help others and to grow and evolve ourselves. Together, you and I, let's help more people. If you would please leave a review on iTunes, and a good one, by the way. I'd be grateful, and through your assistance together, we can transform more lives. Thanks for listening.